Hey, Michael with XForcePC. Want to go over the new Platinum system we put together. We have changed the form factor. We're going with a smaller form factor. Now note I say smaller. That doesn't mean it's a small form factor case. Those should be avoided by gamers at all costs because they're non-standard, for lack of a better term. No, but this uses full-size cards. It's just a smaller case than what we've been using. And there's some improvements here that I want to go over as well. So as you can see, the front is just kind of a plain black front, and not a whole lot to see here. We got a power button, or power LED I should say, up here on the top. Now let's move around to the side. Now on the side there would normally be a windowed side panel, and this looks funny because it's got a plastic film on here that gets peeled off. It'll be perfectly transparent once that is peeled off of there. So what we see here is the i5 version, the non-water-cooled version of this case. So we have a Tower air cooler here. We have an M.2 SSD back up there. You may not be able to see that. Of course, our graphics cards, we can offer all of the fastest graphics cards on the market in this system. It can support all of them. Now this case has a fan in the back, and it has a place for two fans in the front and actually two in the top, so there's a lot of ventilation. There's also a separate chamber for the power supply, so the air for the power supply never mixes with the air inside the case. So the air goes in the bottom and goes out the back for the power supply, which is right behind here, and we'll see more on that in a minute. We have a couple of USB 2.0s. That's this white cable you see here that we've put in the back. We always want to make sure you have a couple of USB 2.0s in case you're using any of the SciTech panels. Now, going back around to the front, and we're going to look at the top. So here in the top, we have a power reset. Of course, we have a headphone, a microphone jack, and a couple of USB 3.0s. That's not really the main thing I wanted to show you. Also wanted to show you this compartment. I'm going to have to sit it back down for a second to take this compartment off, if I can. There we go. So I popped this panel off of the top, and if you get a water cooler, the radiator goes here on the inside, not on top, but on the inside, and there's two fans that blow the air straight out. So the advantage of this type of setup is the hot air that's coming out of that radiator just goes straight out of the top and doesn't mix inside the case. Now, on our previous Platinum system, we had the water cooler in the front, and so the air would go in the front, have to pass all the way through the system, and then out the back again. So this is a better way to do the water cooling, is to have it right there on top. The other thing this has that's really nice is it's got some really good filtration. So let's talk about that. In the bottom, there is a full-length filter in the bottom that will filter all of the air coming in the bottom, and the majority of that's going to be drawn in by the power supply. So it'll filter that air, and you'll want to clean this, you know, every 6 months or so, especially if it's sitting on the floor. It'll pick up a lot more dust. We also have behind the front panel here, which I've just popped off, the front filter. I'll just take that off and kind of see that. It's just kind of a fine sort of mesh, almost like a screen like you have on your screen door, except a little bit smaller holes in there. And that'll filter the air coming in the front. And depending on, you can see here, there's a spot for another fan here, and depending on what hardware you have in your system, you might find that we've put another fan here. And of course I mentioned about the water cooler in the top. If you opt for an overclocked i7, that's where that will go. So I'll just put the filter back in, and I'll put the front panel back on, and there's that. Now, you might be wondering, well, how does the air get in? I mean, the whole front is blocked. Well, on both sides, there are these vents. So there's plenty of room for air to get in these vents on both sides. Excuse me, so don't worry about that. Around back, some pretty standard stuff. We have the graphics card here. We have an Ethernet port, a bunch of USB 3 and 3.1s, And these are the motherboard video ports. You won't use those. We have a couple of USB 2.0s down here. If you opt for Wi-Fi, we have the Wi-Fi here, and these are the antennas for the Wi-Fi. That is typically, we have that as an option. And then of course we have the power supply down here and where the power goes in. And lastly, on the other side, it's just pretty much a plain, excuse me, black side on the far side, so not a whole lot to talk about there. So in this system, we're using the Z370 chipset. That is the chipset for the enthusiast. So it supports overclocking. It supports a lot of PCI Express lanes. That's good if you do multiple graphics cards, and you don't really do that with X-Plane because it doesn't support SLI, where you combine multiple graphics cards to gain additional performance. But it is nice to have all those PCI Express lanes available to you. And then of course we're using 8th generation Intel processors in here, so 8600K, 8700K, and then there may be actually a subsequent processor release after that. So there you go, there's the current Platinum system, the current iteration of it, and where we've shrunk it a little bit, and we've actually improved our cooling and filtration situation at the same time.